Thank you very much for this introduction. And me too, as other speakers, was thinking, so when was the last time when I was in a live event? And I think it was around a year and 4 months ago. So I'm very happy to be able to do that. And I understand this is one of the first live events in Vilnius, so I'm happy not missing anything. And since we're talking today about digitalization and digital transformation, so this is live events. I think that's one area where I would be happy to go a few steps back and to come back to the more live events. Now, when thinking, I see that the presentation is one on another, but let's see. Well, maybe we can try to switch it off and on again. So I was, before preparing for this event, I was thinking, so, okay, digital finance, and there are so many things that you can tell about that. And overall about digitalization, you can tell so many things. And what is it really? And digital and green transitions are the two goals which we are invited by whole the European Union to move, and this is what we're doing. And if you look at our government programs, so we can see that digitalization is one of the most important topics. And if we look at recovery and resilience facility, the way these funds will be spent, so 20% of them are going to be spent on digitalization. So that's why it's a really important area, and it covers everything. And I think that finance and banking is one of the areas which is moving fastest forward. And so we have already quite a good progress in that. And I am happy overall to say that Lithuania is not lagging behind on that. Perhaps okay, so I will just then start a little bit. So I wanted to cover a few topics which I think are the most important for digital finance. And these are decline in the use of cash. Second thing is transition towards cashless economies, which we see happening across the globe, and I think mostly, especially in Europe, in our region. Third thing is private digital currencies, the trend which we are already observing around, well, over 10 years. Fourth thing is central bank digital currencies, which is going to be a game changer across the globe. And finally, I would like to touch upon the threats which are coming together with digital finance. I will maybe give a second or two for the presentation to come back on the screen. It will be easier to continue like that.
Well, maybe while it's coming up, I can ask a question. Yeah, mic is on. Thank you. So, but Eivilė, so we are improvising. So,
it's okay.
But I thought it's a good time to ask a question. And I don't know, have you done at the Association of Lithuanian Banks or somewhere? We saw from Nerijus, you know, a chart saying how many percentage of companies think that, for example, the staff is their biggest stop to development. So did you do some kind of this, or either survey, or what's your feeling? How high on the agenda is digitalization at the Lithuanian banks, at the traditional banks?
Well, so I have some numbers to show about that, but just a general trend, I would say that so digitalization in banking, and not only in Lithuania, but across the globe, especially in Europe, I think started around 2012. This is when the numbers start showing the decline in use of the cash, and this is what we see when the banks started to remove infrastructure, that is, remove branches and ATM networks, and so we can very easily understand ourselves when did it start and what happened. So we got iPhones, right, and other smartphones. And so I think from the personal perspective, it's so to understand what is digital finance is when the bank is in your phone, right? So that's, I think this is important, and that trend is going to certainly continue.
So it's one. And did COVID increase this interest? I mean, was there? I mean, because everything, like in well, the law business is very boring in a sense of we don't have this. You don't have a law firm on your smartphone yet. Well, it's coming, I'm sure, but we became digital in one day. You know, we had to because we couldn't go to offices, we couldn't go to meetings with clients. So it's very simple. But did something happen like this with the banks? Was there some kind of boost because of COVID? Absolutely, and I can ask you, each of you, to think when was the last time you were in a bank branch live, and that is the answer. And if you remember yourself 10 years, for example, ago, we were going to the bank for many things, and today this is a mere exception. And if we look at the way the infrastructure, physical infrastructure of the banks is changing. So now we see that banks are more transforming their branches into the competence centers, where you can go and in the events when you want to, for example, take a loan, or for other more important investment advice. But for the daily banking, video conferences is the way to go right now. And if we look at the numbers of video conferences this year compared with the beginning of last year or year before, so it's a several-fold increase. Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's back. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your answers. Okay, that looks good. Thank you. So then we can move at the first slide, so cash. So then again, I thought, so how do you measure the best way to measure what is digitalization and finance in a simple way, which we can all understand? And actually, the decline in the use of cash is the most understandable and the most obvious way to measure digitalization and finance. And interestingly enough, today in the morning we had a discussion in the parliament about the increase of access to cash in the country, and that is the sort of the underlying also other part of the story. So what is happening in Lithuania with the access with the use of cash? So we see that in 10 years, use of cash decreased several times, and the use of cashless payments is increasing rapidly. We, of course, can expect this trend just only to go up. Now, the interesting thing, what I would like to draw attention is just in the year 2020, you see there's a little bit of increase of use of cash, that is around second half of 2020, and that is the effect of COVID, because COVID is also somewhat a crisis, and this is what is happening usually during crisis. People feel a little bit stressed, and they tend to take a bit more money home for home, but this is just, as you see, just a short-term event. So that is the best picture of what is happening in Lithuania with digitalization. So we see it's progressing in a rapid speed. Now, how do we look at it in the context of the EU? So here, I'm happy to know that we are actually doing quite well, and it's not only Lithuania. This is dominant in all of our Nordic-Baltic region, and I would say probably that south of Europe is sort of below the average of the EU, and we are progressing quite fast towards even more digital finance. And the majority of people, as you say, that also believe that the pandemic will just increase this trend, and which we feel, I believe everyone feels on ourselves, that now we understood that it is very comfortable to do all the things online, and we don't have to have live interactions with our banks and other financial markets participants. Now, there's another interesting trend, and again, COVID increased a lot this trend, and the physical fact about the cash, because the World Health Organization told that the contact with cash can increase the likeliness of spread of the disease, and it did believe that it has also additional effect on the spread of cashless payments. And I think
today we are still a generation that knows what is cash, but I think give another 10 years, 15 years, our children, they will not want even to touch cash. And say, for example, if we talk today about cash, so in 15 years we are going to be sorry that bank cards are disappearing because they will be in chips, maybe somewhere implanted in our fingers. I'm quite sure it's going to happen, and we will be sorry to see bank cards leaving, but that's how it is. And so there's another interesting trend which is happening. So there are more market participants coming in, as Google Pay, Amazon, and others. Mostly right now they are more located in US, but you know, today the world has no borders, and they are coming very rapidly also in Europe, and many people already use them in Lithuania. So I think that's an important trend for the whole banking sector. So we're having the other very influential participants coming in that are going to create additional pressures for competition in the banking sector. Now, the trend which is very obvious also in Lithuania, so that is the financial technologies. And we know we usually call them fintechs, and we can say that in Lithuania, we are leaders in terms of the numbers of how many fintechs we have in Europe. And that's, I wanted to highlight another step, that is neobanks. So overall, I see fintechs as a sandbox for the banks. First, they get a bit easier license, they learn how to survive in a finance world, and then they, of course, go for the banking license, because the banking license opens up much more opportunities to do activities not only inside the country, but across the globe. So I think we can be proud that we have one of the most known neobanks right now is Revolut. He is a member of our association also. So there's something that we can observe and see how these new type of the banks are coming in, and I also call them virtual banks or internet banks, so these are synonyms. And I think this is quite important trend, and it started around 5 years ago. And so these banks operate in a way that they don't have at all any physical infrastructure, and they don't work with cash at all. And this is the new trend which just started, and I think that there will be no more new banks which are sort of being established and work with physical infrastructure, because the future is only in the cashless solutions. Now, so the part before was about the private sector initiatives and about the habits which we see changing in our lives, but there's also a few things that some countries are doing to move towards cashless economies. And here I'm happy to note that Sweden, Finland, and some other countries in Europe are in the front lines of that. And say, for example, Sweden has decided to move completely to the cashless economy and pretty soon, which means that cash will not be accepted anymore as a means of payment. And that has, of course, a lot of benefits. And we see the same trends in Finland and UK and other countries. And here, I think that that's something that we missed here in Lithuania. We have certain initiatives. We've been talking about that. So because we want to reduce the use of cash, we understand it has a relation with shadow economy. And so, but I think that some more efforts should be put, and not only from the financial sector part, which means to develop new means of payment according to the customer's need, but also from the government side, there is a need to look at this a little bit more structured way, because one thing is for people to have cards in their hands, but another thing, they have to be accepted. And of course, we know that they are accepted very easily in big cities where we go, but for example, in the regions, it's still quite a problem. It's not everywhere that bank cards are accepted, and to the extent we are discussing about with the banks, they are very much willing to contribute to these efforts. And I think that's where more cooperation between the government and the financial sector could be, how to solve the other side of the problem, that cashless payments are available everywhere. Now, moving on to the next trend, and that is the rise of cryptocurrencies. And so these are the main top 10 cryptocurrencies and their capitalization. Just a month old data, and we see, of course, that Bitcoin is a champion here, and the start of Bitcoin was in 2009, and we see, so these are just few cryptocurrencies, but they are coming up almost probably every day somewhere around the world. You can have probably new cryptocurrency is appearing, and so as we know, how governments treated them at the beginning, they were very suspicious, and they continue to be suspicious because there are many reasons. They are not safe. There's a lot of speculation in the market, which you can also observe, but I think that the only thing what we can all conclude and what governments have concluded around the world, that is a trend you cannot stop. That's it. It's here, and it is not going to go away, and it's not possible to regulate it because it's, for me, it reminds me a little bit of the virus. It's, you can't stop it. It doesn't have the borders in a sense that it is going to go spread across the globe. And for the sake of my own interest, I also have few of them. And I must say it's been a bumpy ride for the last few years, but yes, I indeed could confirm that there's definitely regulation. That is something that is so much needed, especially for transparency and market manipulation, which we see is happening with few of the coins, cryptocurrencies right now. Now, in this slide, there's a little bit of all the data, but what I wanted to show the globe and to see how much Bitcoin holders are worldwide. Why it is interesting, because what we see that actually it's not that it's only in the developed world this trend is happening. We see that cryptocurrencies are being used also in developing countries quite widely, and I believe that one of the reasons why it is because it is not that transparent, and so also is still being used for shadow economy. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed also by the regulators. And there's another very interesting novelty that's coming in, that is Facebook is planning to issue its digital currency. They are having plans to do that already for a few years. You know, it's if you have observed this process, it's not been easy for them to do that, and they've been promising to issue that already for a while. I think the last time they said is February, and they keep postponing, but I think it's going to happen inevitably. And the first market for them is going to be the US, but also also they're going to do that in Europe. So, but what does that mean? How many customers they have straight away for this currency? So we can understand that these are millions, and if that currency is going to be attractive, it will pick up, go viral, let's say. So I think it has a really great potential to become one of the most important currencies, and that's where the danger for central bank currencies comes in. And so my next slide is about central bank digital ambitions. So here's a map where you can see different regions and countries which are now talking about the digital currency. And I think two interesting ones before going to Europe. I would highlight Bahamas, who already have moved to the digital currency. They have sand dollar, and that's the first country in the world that already has moved to such type of the currency. Now, a second interesting country is China. And so they have been doing digital yuan research for already around 5 years. And they're not there yet, but we can imagine when they are going to launch that, so that is going to change completely the world. Now, looking at the US, I think first time that I read the combination of the words digital dollar was quite recent, I think just a few months ago. But I think, and actually US is, since I lived there for 5 years, actually surprisingly cash economy. It's almost, half of the economy is run on cash, but they are also forced to think about that. And the same trend is happening in the European Union. So European Central Bank is actually one of the youngest large central banks, because it was established just around 20 years ago. And so they are now starting to talk about digital euro. And I am observing those conversations pretty closely, and what can I say? You can say that the European Central Bank has a lot of worries, and all the market participants, including ourselves as association, we are participating in that debate through European Banking Federation. And so there's a banking sector, traditional banking sector, has one major concern with the digital currency. So now imagine if European Central Bank is issuing digital euro, and imagine crisis comes. So what are people to do? They are going to switch from the traditional banks to the digital euro because it is going to be safer. So that's I would say the major problem that European Central Bank has to solve, to design digital euro in the way, not to make it, the trouble for the private banking. There's another thing what they are looking at, and where is the problem is that, so we have financial technologies which are picking up in Europe, and it started around 10 years ago when regulators decided to demonopolize payment services from the banking regulation. So that's when it all started, when payment services provided, non-bank payment services providers were allowed to join payment systems. And that's when it all started, and that sector is picking up and pretty well. And now the question will be, so if you have digital euro and it works well and it is free of charge, so why would you need other private sector solutions? So I would say at this process, these are two most important questions which European Central Bank is thinking about. Another thing, there's a consumer voice extremely loud on this digital euro conversation, and what their main point is that it has to have the same level accessibility as cash euro, and that is, of course, pretty difficult to implement because not all the parts of the society are digitalized the way as the most advanced ones. And another thing, it has to be anonymous, so which means it has to be based on the blockchain technology. And as we know, the blockchain technology is pretty recent. And so the question of putting all the European Union currency on the blockchain technology, such a fresh thing, that's quite, I believe, should be pretty scary for European Central Bank. Nevertheless, there's a strong political pressure on European Central Bank to move forward with this project. And so the pressure is coming from competing central banks, but the most important pressure is coming from the private sector, from the private digital currencies that I showed before. Because if central banks are not going to do that, so soon we are going to have just private currencies, and in this way central banks are going to lose their monetary policy tools. And that's the major threat that I heard Christine Lagarde highlighted just a couple of weeks ago. First time it was admitted that digital currency, European digital currency, is inevitable, independent of technological questions which are still remaining. So I believe that in 4 or 6 years, some first tests are going to start with digital euro. And this is what the European Central Bank is working right now on. And the final topic that I wanted to touch upon, and so with the digitalization, digital threats are coming, and there are a number of them. There's just one of them, that is money laundering and terrorist financing. There's another one, cyber attacks, which are happening not only in the financial sector, but also in all the areas. And as we know, it is used in elections and so on. So there's kind of, it became a tool also in the so-called combined war. I think it's picking up as a popular tool. And but digital threats, and especially money laundering and terrorist financing, I think one of the ones which is becoming increasingly difficult task, and it requires a lot of cooperation around the world, because now if we imagine bank robbery 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it would be just kind of a live break-in into the branch, and today the bank robbery can happen digitally, and so the hackers could be from all around the world. They can be in groups, working in groups, so which means that all the banks have to invest tremendous amounts of money to protect themselves. And money laundering also is a topic that, or an issue that almost never anymore is a case of one country. It's usually the scheme of money laundering involve 5, 6, 7, 10, or even more countries. That's why the loopholes, if there are in the financial regulation anywhere in the world, become sort of the entry point. That's why it's also important for us to always keep an eye on that when we are talking about financial regulation, and not to create the loopholes. And so also you know, more or less, you heard some famous cases of money laundering, and as you see in this index, which is OECD index of Basel index on money laundering, so actually Lithuania in 2020 looked pretty good, which is, I'm happy very much, and we are going to put all of our efforts to continue this trend. We are doing a lot together with the banks to keep very high standards. And just a few weeks ago, we have announced about establishment of anti-money laundering competence center. It is a public-private partnership between the banks, Ministry of Finance and Central Bank, and that's going to be a platform where we all together are going to try to strengthen our system and to protect it from money laundering even more. So that is going to be end of my presentation. These are just the trends. I thought, should I draw any conclusions? But I think this is such a big process which cannot be concluded in any way. But the only thing I can say, it really has already started, and there's no way back. And I think in 10 years, the banking and our ways of how we are using financial service is going to be completely different than it is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.